This video is sponsored by Ground News. Hamilton. Good art, bad politics. Hamilton. Catchy songs, but so liberal. Hamilton. Great theater, but American imperialism. Hamilton. Hottest founding father, but elitist slave trader. Liberals bad. Liberals not good. Bad thing. Don't want. Alright, well, that settles that, right? America bad, liberals bad, capitalism bad. In 1965, Alain Badiou gathered France's philosophical elite to debate the day's most fundamental questions. What is the nature of truth? How do we reckon with the entanglement of knowledge and power? Why do they call it oven when you in the cold food, out hot eat the food? 959 people have watched the discussion on YouTube. As I, number 960, watched these thinkers discuss the most fundamental questions of existence, one question lingered in my mind. Who cares? No, really, who cares? Were only 960 people destined to know the nature of truth and knowledge? Was this an omen foreshadowing the future of academic philosophy? An isolated room of musty academics talking past each other about the nature of truth? 3 years later, in 1968, France burst into flames. Far-left student groups and activists, and later factory workers, rose up against the status quo. Though the protest brought the city to a standstill, bringing France face-to-face with the fervor of its founding revolution for the first time in 180 years, the protesters were ultimately unsuccessful. Yet, in the aftermath of May 68, the mood of the philosophical rooms shifted. Discussions about the content of truth and knowledge shifted into discussions about the conditions for truth and knowledge. More and more popular movements discussed how truth and knowledge are conditioned by capitalism, modernity, and power. So perhaps Badiou's buddy was completely wrong when he said,
D'accord, est une philosophie qui est capable de se traduire d'une certaine façon dans la langue commune de tous. Oui.
Philosophy was ignited by the spirit of 68. It served the event, the doing. Philosophy cannot create truth. It can only formalize an existing rupture in the service of an existing truth. A popular protest or event reveals some truth about the antagonisms in the status quo, and philosophy only works through these truths.
Imagine you get a taco from a taco stand.
You know when white people get really excited about food and before they're about to take a bite, they go,
The moment of truth.
well, they're onto something. Truth is in the bite. Truth is a moment. It's indescribable within our current understanding. It's beyond the established state of knowledge. Sure, you can hire a tour guide to tell you all about the taco stand's history. You could read Google Maps and learn every conceivable fact about the taco stand. But that's just knowledge. Truth exists in the event of pure ecstasy, when nothing else exists except you and some good-ass meat.
This video is not a defense of Hamilton, nor a critique per se. It's more like a meditation, questions, a kind of desperate search for truth. For the past few months, I've been in somewhat of a philosophical rut. Some might say a postmodern hole. You know the kind. Oh my God, everything is a social construct, so on what basis can I make ethical or political claims? How do I be a person when subjectivity is a social construct, when everything's racist, when everything is historically contingent, including, and especially, our most intimate experiences? You get me? And I never thought I'd say this, but for once in my life, I do not want to be inside this hole. It's strangely moist, and people are using words I don't understand. I don't want to be in a postmodern hole. I want to be post-hole. 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 What is Hamilton's legacy? How does it help us tell the story of the past 20 years? How does it help us answer the age-old philosophical question, can historically oppressive ideas or figures be re-articulated in the service of something greater? Or should we relegate them to the dustbin of history with all the other weirdos? Post-hole, 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 post-hole.
Alexander Hamilton, the United States' first Treasury Secretary, first took office on 9/11. Not looking good. Thankfully, it was 1789, a pretty good year for it to be 9/11, actually. And it was a good year for Alexander Hamilton too, as this was finally an opportunity for him to realize his plans for establishing a national bank. But he wasn't always rubbing shoulders with George Washington and elite early American statesmen. Hamilton was born from an illegitimate marriage on the Caribbean island of Nevis. His younger years were rough. His father wasn't involved in his life, and his mother died when he was young. But because he was intelligent, well-read, and a talented writer, he eventually found work clerking for a local merchant. His ability to turn tragic situations into opportunity soon paid off. After a raging hurricane destroyed his town, Hamilton wrote a letter to his estranged father describing the destruction. One of Hamilton's mentors found the letter, and he found it so impactful that he published it in a local newspaper. Readers were so moved by the talent of the young writer that they decided to pool their money together to send Hamilton to the United States for education and opportunity. In the United States, he quickly rose to prominence as a war veteran, a lawyer, a politician, and of course, as the United States' first Treasury Secretary. And then he died. He, famously died, actually. After talking shit about his old friend Aaron Burr, they decided to shoot each other, and, well, only Burr walked away. Young immigrant with a tragic backstory rises to great heights as a writer in New York City? Perfect Oscar bait premise. But unfortunately, Lin-Manuel Miranda was a theater kid. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the child of immigrant parents from Puerto Rico, was born in New York City, growing up in the Inwood neighborhood near Washington Heights. His mother was a psychologist, and his father an influential political consultant. Soon, their child Lynn left home to embark on a path that would lead him to write the work that put the Miranda name on the map. Hamilton. Hamilton bad. Hamilton liberal. Hamilton came into my house and shot me. Miranda went to a good private university, majoring in theater and film. There he wrote the first draft of what would become Miranda's first musical, In the Heights. Miranda built off his personal experience growing up near the Dominican-American neighborhood of Washington Heights in New York City. He would eventually take the show to Broadway, where it received critical acclaim and recognition as a landmark for Latino representation in theater. This is quite respectable, in my honest IMO, and it earned Miranda a lot of credibility. Something that would eventually prove useful as he was on the hunt for his next Linspiration. In 2008, while on vacation in Mexico, he picked up Ron Chernow's 2008 biography of Alexander Hamilton.
I grabbed a biography off the shelf of Alexander Hamilton because I wanted a big fat book to read on vacation.
Just like the moment of biting into that delicious street taco, the moment of truth hit. Inspiration struck.
I found it deeply moving and deeply personal when I read it.
Hamilton's biography struck a chord. Miranda saw his own biography in Hamilton's.
Alexander Hamilton had this really full and tragic American life.
Both of them have deep connections to the American immigrant story. Miranda as the child of immigrants and Hamilton as an immigrant from the Caribbean.
Just felt like it was the proto-American immigrant story.
Both built their lives as writers.
It's very much a love letter to writers and being able to really change your life with writing.
Both are New Yorkers.
He's kind of the New York founding father.
It seemed obvious. This was a story that he had to tell. That he had to tell.
And it's so much the quintessential immigrant story of redefining yourself when you come to a new place. And the sense I got really early in Ron Chernow's Hamilton biography was the sense of, I know this guy.
Combining hip-hop music with traditional Broadway tropes, Miranda began writing Hamilton's story. During the writing process, Miranda received a call from the White House. They needed to borrow $10. The Great Recession was a different time. He didn't have $10, but he instead proposed, how about the $10 founding father without a father? So in 2009, Miranda gave the White House a show.
I'm thrilled the White House called me tonight because I'm actually working on, it's a concept album about the life of someone I think embodies hip-hop, Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. You laugh, but it's true.
Miranda's performance at the White House night of spoken word in 2009 stunned the audience.
Alexander Hamilton.
They laughed, unsure how to react. But one audience member watched along with intrigue. the son of a Kenyan immigrant who lived through the American dream's last hurrah, who lived a life that seemed ever more impossible as the financial crisis closed the decade. The music from Hamilton captured his heart in the same way he, America's first African-American president, first captured the public's hopes.
I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
Perhaps he could never fully affirm this hope. Nevertheless, the American promise binds these three men's stories: Alexander Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Barack Obama, individuals who came from relatively modest backgrounds and rose to prominence through, at least in part, their ability. They all came to profess some version of American liberal ideals, and their paths all interestingly collide in this singular piece of art. The musical isn't just a story about Hamilton's life. It's the story of what it means to live an American life. What does it mean to leave behind a legacy? And how does that connect to a larger collective story? The musical answers on behalf of the 21st century American liberal institution. Obama saw the potential in Hamilton's story. And as Lin-Manuel Miranda spent 7 years to write this story from 2009 to 2016, Obama remained one of the musical's biggest supporters.
It has become a favorite in the Obama household.
As the musical evolved from vision to workshop to off-Broadway show and then finally into full Broadway stage production in 2016, excitement for the show grew at an unprecedented rate. Celebrity attendance, Obama gives a standing ovation, critical acclaim. It began to penetrate the culture. On Broadway, the show started to sell out months in advance. Awards and record-shattering hype thrown in its face, fandom culture abound, politicians singing its praises. Why did it resonate so much? What was so new about Hamilton? For a lot of people, Hamilton wasn't just about making history hip and catchy. The musical was Miranda's genuine effort in trying to connect the United States' original mythology to today. The wildly fragmented and meaning-hungry 21st century, whose faith in the established order was critically tested, if not mercilessly murdered with the 2008 financial crisis. People were disillusioned AF with the institution. Financial institutions and their shenanigans led to a worldwide economic crisis. People lost their jobs, their homes, and perhaps their hope in the American promise. We still feel that today. With the rise of political discourse on social media, the 21st century has felt as fragmented as ever, and faith in American institutions has reached an all-time low. Misinformation and sensationalist media is only getting worse as we head into the next grueling election cycle, and there are growing fears that our democracy is at stake. 'Cause it is. Half of Americans have put their faith in Trump, a figure who tried to overthrow the results of the last election and who the Supreme Court recently declared immune from criminal conviction for official presidential acts. As political figures use misinformation to gather support for anti-democratic causes, tools like Ground News are more important than ever. Ground News is a website and app that gathers articles from over 50,000 sources worldwide, allowing you to compare how different outlets cover the same story. Ground News gives you access to a wealth of information about the news you read and where it comes from, all backed by multiple independent news monitoring organizations. One of the features that I use the most is the article analysis tool. When reading the story about the Trump immunity case and its implications for our democracy, I was able to see that over 255 sources covered this story. The bias distribution chart shows me the sources' political leanings. In this case, 45% of the sources are from the center. I can also check who owns these different sources. Over 51% of these sources come from media conglomerates. Now that I know who exactly is writing the news I'm reading, I know exactly what dose of skepticism to take when diving into a story. Scrolling down to the headlines gives me a broader look at the reporting. Left-leaning headlines hone in on the threat to democracy by invoking words like dictator or bluntly saying that America is cooked. Right-leaning sources have a more celebratory tone, emphasizing Trump's big win. Just a glance at these few headlines and you get a sense of the two vastly different realities Americans live in. I also keep myself in check with the My News Bias feature. It gives me a detailed look at the news I'm reading, showing which sources I check out the most, their bias, how accurate they are, what country they're about, and who owns them. I thought I was a raging leftoid, but the news I read seems to mostly come from the center. I might check out more left or right-leaning sources in the future to get a better sense of what the other sides on the spectrum have to say about a story. Working on this video and researching the dangerous rift in American life that's been developing in the past decade or so, a reoccurring theme that I seem to encounter is the unwavering commodification of our media, whether online, in print, or on TV. Everything seems to be happening at once. There's everything to fear and nothing to look forward to. But I haven't felt that way when using Ground News. It feels like what news should be: honest, transparent, and comprehensive. If you want to experience news as it should be, visit ground.news/Alexander Avila to give it a try. If you sign up through my link, you get 40% off the Vantage subscription, which gives you unlimited access to all these features. If you at all resonate with Ground News' mission to improve the way that we use the news, I encourage you to check them out at my link, ground.news/Alexander Avila. Well, enough about how the 2010s media landscape has been a disaster for the human race. For now, if we want to understand Hamilton, we have to understand why it resonated in the specific moment it appeared. Imagine post-recession America. If you don't have a job, you've been evicted from your home, you can't afford to buy groceries, what's going to give you hope? Perhaps an accomplishment that signals the symbolic defeat of America's long-lasting racial violences. Some kind of reassurance that, hey, maybe America let you down in one way, but America bends towards justice, right? A version of America that incorporates the full diversity of its population. So in 2008, America voted for that hope.
To reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one. That while we breathe, we hope. And where we are met with cynicism and doubt, and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can.
Lin-Manuel Miranda took that hope and turned it into a liberal bedtime story, Hamilton. And with it, he told the world that, yes, the American project is worth saving. America is worth loving and hoping for. And that message took the world by storm. Politicians cited lyrics in their speeches. High schools played the rap battles in their classes. Hamilton was this close from being removed from the $10 bill, and then he wasn't. Because of Hamilton. Why did Hamilton work so well? What was it about the packaging, the content, and the timing that took Hamilton from a silly, amusing idea to a worldwide phenomenon?
First, there's the casting. The main cast of characters composed of America's most important founding figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they're all played by actors of color. The logic behind this is simple.
This is the story of America then, told by America now.
You know, I wasn't around for the 1700s, but I'm pretty sure people of color existed then too. And as much as our founding documents try to erase those lives, they had stories as well, even if they never get told. But I understand what he's doing here. By allowing underrepresented groups to tell the story of a nation that has historically dehumanized them, there's a type of reclamation of power. In theory, you know, a sort of statement like, we've always been here and we're Americans just like you. And that is genuinely meaningful to a lot of people. It was meaningful to Leslie Odom Jr., the actor who played Aaron Burr.
As a casual fan of the theater, of the genre, of this form, I had never in my life, you see, seen four men of color on a stage singing together about friendship and brotherhood in my life. And so to me, that was the revolution. The image of that packed such power that I committed in that moment.
Is it up to me or anyone critical of the American liberal establishment to take that moment and its significance away from him? From anyone?
The story of the creation of this country is our story too.
Love it or hate it, that's one reason it resonated. The casting. Then there's the style. Though the music in Hamilton ranges from rap to boogie-woogie to pop, hip-hop ties it all together. Miranda fundamentally saw Hamilton's life as a hip-hop story.
Lynn invited me to In the Heights, and I went backstage and he said, Ron, I was reading the book and hip-hop songs started rising off the page.
Premiering only 2 years before hip-hop surpassed rock as the most popular music genre, Hamilton links contemporary American cultural sensibilities with a past mythos to tell it in a new and interesting way.
I knew the events of Hamilton's life, and I knew that this music was uniquely suited to tell it.
And he approaches hip-hop and rap as a genuine fan. His respect for the art form is all over the music.
It's the 10 dual commandments. It's the 10 crack commandments.
Makes me wonder why I even bring the thunder.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I'm only 19, but my mind is older. I'm only 19, but my mind is older.
When telling this story, he uses that knowledge very intentionally to give personality to the characters.
I spent about on and off a year just writing Hamilton's verses because, again, I'm trying to prove my thesis right. He needs to be so impressive that he brings everyone around to his way of thinking. The band of brothers kind of sing really sort of simple party raps at the top.
I'm John Lawrence in the place to be. It's 2 pints of Sam Adams, but I'm working on 3.
And then have him come with this very complex, Rakim-derived polysyllabic flow.
The past patiently waiting the passionate gnashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation.
Needs to feel like he's from the future.
Some criticize the use of hip-hop in the show, arguing that hip-hop, as an art form, aims to challenge the status quo, while Hamilton's status is quite quo. And to that I say, hip-hop is a diverse art form told from a variety of perspectives. Of course, hip-hop has origins in the experiences of disenfranchised African-American communities, which lends it an inherently antagonistic relationship to traditional American institutions. But these marginal cultural narratives are always in conversation with the dominant culture. One scholar argues that many of the rags to riches narratives prevalent in hip-hop songs are reflections of a very common American attachment to liberal entrepreneurship and individual success. As with all art forms, there's variance. Much of hip-hop subverts traditional narratives, and other hip-hop tells a traditional narrative from a different perspective. Hip-hop serves Miranda's purpose very well. Miranda takes hip-hop, an art form often written off by conservatives as corrupting American values,
concern for what these records will do on the street.
Fear that what started out as music to inform has turned into music that incites.
Many of the titles suggest violence, sex, drug use, and profanity.
Hip-hop has done more damage to black and brown people than racism.
And shows how these contemporary genres, once thought to be antagonistic with American ideals, are actually just different versions of the same American essence.
I drew a direct line between Hamilton's writing his way out of his circumstances and the rappers I'd grown up adoring.
They wrote themselves out of circumstances.
Yes, but they also wrote about their circumstances, which is what Hamilton did.
Now, that's Miranda's interpretation and rearticulation of hip-hop. It doesn't have to be yours, but I'd say he certainly succeeded at what he aimed to do. So, casting, musical style. There's another final reason why Hamilton resonated so deeply. It's the one that underlies the whole project. Hamilton ties the past with the present. The music is somehow universally contemporary. The ways characters talk to each other is very modern. 2 of the characters are gay for each other, and its cast looks unlike any theatrical cast you would have seen prior. Together, it completes Miranda's thematic vision, the call to renew our American story. The explicitly political content of the show, as in its depiction of policy and statecraft, is also quite contemporary. You see, when America was just getting started, people didn't really know what was going on. Like, okay, how do we turn this sausage fest into a proper government? Is it gonna be a bunch of small, autonomous states doing their own thing? Or is a strong central government gonna run the show? Is this an urban, industrializing nation full of gay cosmopolitan openness, or an idyllic agrarian country led by small communities? Is there a dress code? What if we all got naked? It was still an open question. So what happened? Please God, someone tell me what happened! Today's America is Hamilton's America. Alexander Hamilton envisioned a powerful central government with strong state institutions facilitating the flow of capital. As Ron Chernow writes in his Hamilton biography, today we are indisputably the heirs to Hamilton's America, and to repudiate this legacy is, in many ways, to repudiate the modern world.
And he's right. Today's bureaucratic institutions, many of which Hamilton invented, move the country. Financial systems are in place to control all the money shit, and it works, mostly. And yet, though our governance systems owe a great debt to Hamilton, we're still as clueless as we've ever been. Founding fathers were making it up as they went along, and so are we. We're still debating the character of the nation. States' rights, suburban sprawl, freedom, bureaucracy, mass incarceration, ambrosia salad, medical debt, parking lots.
You can draw a direct connection between what the founders were doing and what we do today.
The content of the debate is different, but there's a continuity in our political DNA.
It was like, oh, we've been fighting about the same things forever. It's no accident that we're still fighting about how much is the government involved in our lives, which is what Jefferson and Hamilton rap battle about in my show.
Hamilton doesn't say anything new, but it argues that what has been said can always be articulated in a different way by different people. The casting, the musical style, and the political framing all came together into this perfect snapshot of the Obama-era faith in principles and process. The refusal to give up on our history, even when we've been given up on.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
As much as liberals love to love Hamilton, leftists love to hate Hamilton, mostly because liberals love it. Now, to a conservative, anyone who even mildly believes in gay people might as well be a Marxist, but there's a meaningful difference. Liberals affirm that established institutions, even if flawed, are effective instruments at achieving desired goals like social justice. That's totally in line with the Hamilton thing.
If you're inspired by Hamilton, if you're inspired by our founders, understand that the system of government they designed only works if you participate.
See you at the polls.
Liberals say, we can make the system work towards something better.
Voting is the most powerful way to express who you are and what you care about.
On the other hand, leftists mostly reject this notion, arguing that the system itself is a barrier to social justice. Liberals use existing institutions to redirect capitalist markets or state powers towards positive change, while leftists want to replace capitalist markets and institutions with alternative economic and political structures beyond profit and hierarchy, hopefully towards something more just. Here's a leftist.
A revolutionary realizes, however, that in order to create a world where human beings can live and love and be healthy and create, you have to completely revolutionize the entire fabric of society. You have to overturn the economic structure, and you have to destroy this political apparatus.
And here you anticipate the problem. A liberal might look at the violence of America's founding, like slavery and genocide, and say something to the effect of, well, that just happened.
Your fave is problematic.
The social liberals' vision is simple and elegant. Yeah, we know America did all that stuff, but we can use our founding ideals and democratic frameworks towards new goals to solve new problems.
There's stuff I find repulsive and loathsome about all of them because they're human. And my mission really was not to deify Hamilton at all. It was to present as much of him as I could.
But what's the cost of portraying structural violence as a moment of individual failure? America's greatest failures reduced to the missteps of a few men, as if we can reduce the institution of slavery or the misappropriation of indigenous land to humans gonna human. No, bro, there is nothing universally or transcendently human about the complex, historically specific, and economically unprecedented system of American chattel slavery. In fact, chattel slavery itself relies on the most artificial construction of the word human. Europeans redefined the word humanity to align with the values and perspectives of Western Europeanness. They otherized features and cultures outside of this particular definition. And then the philosophical movement known as the Enlightenment paraded this very particular definition of the human as a universal in order to justify the dehumanization of people who weren't Western European. It's all over John Locke as he justifies settler colonialist expansion in America by claiming that indigenous people are ignorant of civilization, which, of course, to him, meant European traditions of private property. Or when David Hume claims the superiority of the Western model of industrialization so that he could justify his opinion that there never was a civilized nation of any other complexion than white. Human is a historical category that seems open to all, but was created at a particular moment in history for particular political projects. The version of human that we use today was born out of a culture-wide moment of white guys begging the question of humanness, except when they do it, millions of people die. It is used to impose norms and naturalize the artificial. Using a particular definition of human as white, European, and male, governments reify and universalize this particular idea of the human as the ideal rational citizen, and then coincidentally declare undesirable populations as irrational and therefore inhuman. Then institutions use this whole framework to give resources to the rational at the expense of the irrational, the human at the expense of those labeled non-human. Human rights as it's used today was created to universalize and codify the Western state's protection of the particular. Who gets human rights? Those whom the state declares human. Humanness and human rights are legal categories. They aren't given to us by God or the universe or through magic. It's given to us by the law because the state has an interest in doing so. If your human rights are violated, who do you contact? Not your priest, not your local witch, maybe your mom, but if you want anything done about it, a lawyer. The state has a monopoly over what it means to be human and what we should protect about it. This is all to say that the legacy of chattel slavery and racialization is psychosocially totalizing in a way we still cannot reckon with. It's embedded in the logic of how we see institutions, ethics, rights, difference, everything. So, Lin-Manuel Miranda, how could a system, a country built on this version of the word human, in which human functionally means whiteness and maleness within the social structure, how could that system ever effectively advocate for human rights? How could the Constitution ever be re-articulated to stand for the people when the material effects of these founding ideals have never worked in the service of all people? When a man who owned 600 people can sincerely believe that all men are created equal, yet it's catchy, it's well-crafted, it's a masterful use of language and musical motif. What do we do when Hamilton is a good piece of art, when it tells the story it sets out to tell, when it tells it with depth, care, and is extremely effective at moving and communicating with the audience? In a video by CDMX linked below, they argue that the inclusion of these founding violences like slavery in the musical would fundamentally change Hamilton's message and thus the art itself.
Fact is, Lin-Manuel Miranda didn't set out to interrogate America's bloodstained racist history. I'd go so far as to say as the inclusion of an honest depiction of slavery and civil rights would derail the tone of Hamilton to the point of just unwatchability. The weight of slavery would break Hamilton.
As CJ articulates, the purpose of Hamilton is not to reckon with the entirety of our past, but to tell the story of a very specific person. How does this person's story connect us to a greater history?
The story of the founding of this country has something for everyone.
What was the public's response to Miranda's call for others to see that the country had something for everyone? Fans of Hamilton took this message to the extreme, projecting the most radical version of contemporary identity onto the characters in the show, separating the historical figures from their history. You could write an entire honors thesis on the Thomas Jefferson Miku Binder fan art. In fact, somebody did. There's so much that happened in this fandom, from the racism coming from white fans to the scandal around the author of the 1980s AIDS epidemic fanfiction faking their race and HIV diagnosis for material gain. Too much. Don't ask. And you know, it's easy to get mad at young queer people who don't understand the repercussions of staking a claim in the politics of memory. But that's not the problem here. Hamilton, the musical, is already fan fiction. In fact, you might say it's fan fiction of a fan fiction. Hamilton takes the established American mythos, our collective fan fiction about the Founding Fathers, and re-mythologizes it.
In all the shows that Steve and I have written together, including Assassins, you reach a point, I think, where the research is over and you then invent the character who actually existed in history.
The question we have to reckon with is this. What do we lose and what do we gain by telling the story in a certain way?
I was drowning in research, and what you told me was just write the parts you think are a musical.
There actually is a version of Hamilton that includes a rap battle about slavery.
Calling on Congress to end the African slave trade and abolish slavery in all its forms.
But they cut the song. Miranda said that it didn't shed light on the characters, and that presenting a rap battle about slavery would actually falsely lead people to believe that the Founding Fathers ever intentionally tried to stop slavery, which they didn't. Ultimately, the story in terms of narrative effectiveness is better off without the rap battle. But is our political discourse better off for it?
Which is we are just going to try to distill this story to its essence.
It's the historian and political activist's job to fully wrestle with history and justice. All the artist can do is catalyze or expose a critical moment, right? And this is theater, not political activism. Right? Is it really just showbiz when Miranda used Hamilton to raise money for the Democratic National Convention? When he used his platform and the show to advocate for policy in Puerto Rico? As much as I want to be the cool leftist that tells you that America bad and that Hamilton bad, I can't quite do that. Even though you've just heard the part of me that articulated a version of a critique of American ideals, you know, that they aren't universal and that they've never been universal, another part of me wonders, why were Enlightenment ideals able to mobilize a generation of revolutions? Are we really stuck with only two choices, to either destroy that which has been oppressive or to faithfully proclaim its excellence? How can we, the voice of America now, genuinely and sincerely reckon with Hamilton and, to a larger extent, America itself? Liberals. Ugh, liberals. They're just so... And they can't seem to just... Liberals. Ugh. No other piece of art quite captures the Obama era like Hamilton. Its writing process spans the Obama administration, from the year Obama took office to the musical's premiere in the final year of his presidency. Both President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama are huge fans.
Michelle and I love this show.
And it was simply, as I tell everybody, the best piece of art in any form that I have ever seen in my life.
But Miranda doesn't just write about politics, he lives it. The Miranda family are firmly entrenched in the liberal political establishment. His father, Luis, runs an influential consulting firm that has worked on high-profile campaigns, including Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton. Lin-Manuel Miranda himself has raised tons of money for Democratic political campaigns and speaks at events in support of Democratic candidates. He's a grade A pasteurized liberal. He believes in liberal institutions and certainly knows his way around them. But slowly, the world's been dropping liberalism. Between the financial crisis disillusioning the country, misinformation splitting us into fragmented, radicalized realities, and increased awareness of structural injustice, people stopped vibing with some key aspects of liberalism. In the mid-2010s, we witnessed a global resurgence in populism, this whole antagonistic attitude towards elites and the institutions which represent them. What happened? At least in the United States, we were rocking hard with liberal democracy for a while, so what gives? If we want to understand how Hamilton reclaims the American story and what it might mean for us going forward, we have to understand liberalism. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Keep in mind that the definitions of political ideologies are not comprehensive. There's always some Redditor who disagrees or some exception to the rule, but these basic definitions should suffice. In the United States, liberal has two meanings. Let's call the first one capital L liberal, since they take so many L's. Capital L liberals generally support progressive social policy and social welfare. In popular American understanding, it's usually whatever the Democratic Party platform is. A general belief in social justice, social safety nets, gay people, government intervention, the existence of global warming, and good old-fashioned globo homo. Think of that line from Hamilton. Or the other line,
Immigrants, we get the job done.
they're platitudes that reflect the libs' eye towards social progress. Include more people in the tent and use the power of the government as a force towards good. That's capital L liberals. Lowercase l liberals describe a broader group of people. It's a strain of thought that originated in the Age of Enlightenment, an 18th century movement of libs who decided to believe that individuals naturally have rights, freedoms, and liberties. Lowercase l liberals believe that the best way to realize this vision is through a capitalist free market system and a democratic government. Both American Democrats and Republicans are lowercase liberals. Both believe fundamentally in the idea of individual rights, and both fundamentally believe that a capitalist constitutional democracy is the best way to organize the world towards those goals. Why is George Bush in this documentary on Hamilton? Why did Obama say that Hamilton is the
only thing that I think Dick Cheney and I agree on?
Because even if Hamilton espouses pronoun-having capital L liberal platitudes, the musical is fundamentally about how to best fulfill the Age of Enlightenment ideals professed by all lowercase l liberals. Lowercase liberalism is the root of America's shared story, and at the root of Hamilton. Lowercase l liberalism and the broad 18th century political philosophy underlies American ideology, politics, and culture. The belief in liberty, fighting for freedom, rights, it's all a liberal paradigm. Whether you want to tax the rich or give every fetus a gun in the womb, it's all in the name of Enlightenment philosophies of freedom, liberty, and a government that protects these ideas under the law. Freedom sounds cool, doesn't it? Who the hell would be against human rights? Are you stupid? Well, there's plenty of reasons someone might be against liberalism. Maybe they believe that a capitalist liberal democracy isn't the best way to address freedom and human rights. Maybe they believe in some charismatic leader who says that all their problems are going to go away if they suspend elections. There's plenty of reasons someone might not be a liberal or why they might not vibe with the liberal establishment. Here's a few. First, liberals usually work within the confines of the status quo. They work within institutions to make those institutions better. But let's say that the system is fundamentally broken, or at least unable to solve some sort of existential crisis. Man, it's hot in here. Liberals are ill-equipped to fix fundamental systemic flaws because they work within the parameters of the system. Take climate change. Capitalism orients our society towards economic growth. Profit good. Well, what if profit bad, actually? What if it's profitable to wreck the earth because humans want to go fast, vroom vroom?
Cars and freedom.
I want big car fast. Oh, easy. All liberals have to do is use the state to build a regulatory structure so strong against ecological destruction that it becomes unprofitable. Or else we die. Considering the stakes of the situation, the way climate change has turned into a partisan issue, making it even more difficult to legislate, and the limitations of even the most impressive legislative achievements, it looks like capitalism might go with the die option. Some hope that Biden's massive climate bill signals that there's a chance we can regulate away the bad incentive structure. Others suggest that you can't regulate away this type of problem. Perhaps you need a full-on socialist revolution where the workers take a jab at the means of production. Who knows? It's not like we're gonna live to find out. Ultimately, critics of liberalism, or at least establishment liberalism, claim that liberals cannot effectively correct these fundamental systemic problems. They can only rap about them.
You register to vote and it's on. You post that Hillary sign up on your lawn.
A second reason one might be critical of liberalism. Liberal individualism is main character syndrome at the level of the human race, and it sucks. Here's how it's supposed to work on paper. In the not racist version, liberalism proposes that we're all individuals with natural rights and the capacity to reason. The state exists to protect these rights and to allow individuals to flourish. Don't laugh. The free market gives individuals the opportunity to pursue these interests and to rise on the basis of their merits. You're laughing. Okay, so here's how it works in practice. There's a bunch of social conflict in society. Some people win and some people lose. Maybe they won because they played dirty, maybe they were in the right place at the right time, maybe they inherited their winnings. Who knows? But the winners get to decide who lives and who dies. Now, usually, when the winners outright divide society into winners and losers, the winners end up concentrating all the winnings into a small minority, causing the majority of losers to revolt and kill all the winners, and it doesn't work out. So it's best to run things in a way where the winners get to win the most, and the losers also get to win, like, a little bit, but not really. Because in the end, the winners stay winning. It's in the name. The winners get the final say over what we value, how we think, and the parameters for winning in the future. That's basically how liberal states function, which might sound abstract, but we live it every day in the United States. Our society values certain things. If you have a piece of paper that says you spent 4 years learning about something, you get more income opportunities. If you tend to dress a certain way, you're more likely to penetrate certain social circles. If you like the arts that a lot of rich people like, rich people are more likely to like you. Whether or not you get the things that society values is going to depend on the social position in which you're born. Your family's wealth and your community matters a lot. If you're born in the bottom quintile of income, there's a 43% chance you're going to stay there, and a 70% chance you'll stay in the lower half of the income distribution until the day that you die. The chance you make it from the bottom quintile to the top quintile is 4%. In the United States, school funding is, for the most part, tied to property taxes and income taxes. So, if you grow up in a wealthy area, you have access to better schools, better healthcare, and better support systems. Where you live matters so much that public health experts and social researchers have a whole-ass aphorism for it. Tell me your zip code, and I'll tell you how long you will live. Is the system so rigged that we've resorted to literary devices? I mean, it's just the luck of the draw, right? Life has never been fair, and your life outcomes are up to the chaotic forces of the universe. Well, it isn't really random. Because of the legacy of segregation and redlining, the United States, especially its cities, is hella segregated by race and income. Here's a fun map game. If you're American, go to justicemap.org and find the closest major city to you. The website visually plots race and income census data across the country on a map. You know, just in case you ever wanted to feel like shit. Let's go to Los Angeles. Yup, that's segregated by race, all right. Looks like there's a bunch of Hispanics here, a pocket of black people here, some Asian blobs over there, and a lot of cocks on the outer edges. Now, I only have one measly bachelor's degree in sociology from Brown University, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say that we're going to find a lot of low-income households concentrated in this area. All right, now keep in mind, red is low income and blue is high income. All right, yeah, that's disconcerting. And to prove I'm not picking the worst examples, let's see what the 10 most populous cities in the United States look like. New York. We already did that one. Chicago. Houston. Phoenix. Philadelphia. San Antonio. San Diego. Dallas. Jacksonville. Generally not good. Of course, race doesn't always correlate with income in one direction. There are definitely pockets of the United States with large, low-income white populations and middle to upper-class non-white populations. But these tend to be exceptions to the rule. The point is, your hometown, who you interact with, who you're associated with, the misconceptions people have about who you are, even the amount of mistakes that society is willing to tolerate from you, these are all forces mostly out of your control. And they're not random. They're not flukes. Racial and income injustice is the intentional result of United States policy. And there are liberals who know this. Liberals who want to invest in communities within a capitalist system. Perhaps with just the right amount of government investment, there could be a version of capitalism that reflects a true, or at least a truer, vision of meritocracy. Liberals love Hamilton because it's the version of America they want to believe in, that anyone from any background should be able to rise to the top.
How to account for his rise to the top? Man, the man is non-stop.
In a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential.
But we don't live in a generous America, and I'm skeptical if liberal reforms would ever be enough to make it so. Let's check. What does liberal politics look like in practice? The U.S. territory of Puerto Rico faces a massive debt crisis that Puerto Ricans have suffered through for years. In 2015, the governor of Puerto Rico publicly stated that there was no chance to repay the island's debt, and by 2016, Puerto Rico was on the verge of humanitarian disaster as essential services shut their doors. It also didn't help that Puerto Rico has, well, in simple terms, a neo-colonial relationship with the United States. Though it's important to emphasize that Puerto Rico's status is a complex question and a topic over which many Puerto Ricans themselves disagree, nevertheless, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, yet Puerto Ricans can't vote in presidential elections and they don't have voting representation in Congress. So when faced with a crisis, Congress needed to be pushed into action.
Since Puerto Rico has no representation in Congress, perhaps the most prominent spokesperson to emerge on the matter is not a politician, but the creator and star of the Broadway musical Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
It is insane that I am a playwright and I've gotten more attention.
Riding the Hamilton wave, Miranda used his platform to advocate for urgent debt relief for Puerto Rico. Meeting with members of Congress, using every platform at his disposal, he decided to endorse Paul Ryan's plan for debt relief, hoping that it would bring much-needed relief. And of course, he rapped about it.
It's nonpartisan. The hard part is in convincing Congress Puerto Rico matters, so their heart is in the fight for relief. Not a bailout, just relief.
Signed into law on June 30th, 2016, the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act promised to take a firm step in alleviating the debt crisis. The bill resulted in the creation of a U.S.-appointed oversight board of unelected members to manage the country's debt. It resulted in disastrous austerity measures, basically cuts. Cuts to social services, pensions, school closures. Essentially, much of the problems that Promesa tried to solve became even worse. For many, it represented the ongoing force of the American colonial project.
Protesters came on stage because we had been very active in Congress passing something to help, to allow Puerto Rico to file for bankruptcy.
It's kind of a perfect example of the limitations of the type of liberalism Miranda once stood for. Work within the system, compromise, lobby, reach across the aisle. Sure, legislation got passed, but at what cost?
Valid points, because what happened as a result of that was the formation of the Promesa board, which basically asked for austerity, and most of the cuts came at the expense of the University of Puerto Rico. And that was devastating. It's the education of lots of kids. And I hate that, but I have to live with it.
Okay, so liberalism and capitalism as it's practiced in US politics sucks. But it can't be that bad, right? Surely there must be a way out. What about a way through, somehow? Liberalism is based on some kick-ass ideals, right? Freedom. What's wrong with freedom? Let me ask the void. Freedom, as we know it and use it today, is a historically specific concept that emerged at a specific point in the 18th century. On the surface, freedom has come to mean the ability to express the universal rights enshrined by a modern nation-state. But what is the means by which freedom comes into meaning? Freedom is a discourse. It is simply a framework of meaning. Our world is a series of interacting chains of meaning and discourses. We follow and react according to how our societies have taught us to understand. As the modern liberal nation-state emerged in the 18th century, the mode of governance began to shift. The rise of capitalism brought the need for efficiency and productivity, better ways of maintaining social control. Old disciplinary techniques like public torture were too expensive, too ineffective. A fundamental shift occurred in the way states understood human beings. What if instead, the social order could create human beings instead of guiding them? What if the social order found a way to create individuals who would willingly choose the social order? What if we used power not to restrict human action, but to instead control what it means to be human in the first place? And what if those in power could decide not only these definitions, but the very conditions of knowledge in the first place? And so, they said, let us create new knowledge. Let us study human bodies, standardize human bodies, create norms and human categories, naturalize these categories, create norms to make the abnormal, categorize the abnormal as fundamentally different, defective, undesirable, psychiatry to create the psychologically deviant, sexology to create the sexually deviant, criminology to create the criminal. Make these categories transcendent and universal. Make them feel defective and make them turn to the institutions for the cure. Make the artificial feel natural. This is freedom. The freedom to choose what was already chosen for you. This is freedom. Echo. Man, fuck you, Void. There's no reason that any of this couldn't be reappropriated, right? Just because British people ruined the meaning of freedom doesn't mean that I can't enjoy freedom, right? Surely there must be a reasonable way to... Reason. Today we derive our understanding of reason from the Enlightenment... Shut up, okay? Yes, I know reason is a part of the Enlightenment project, something, Western frameworks and discourses, something, racism, capitalism, and control. I know, I get it. It all sucks. It's all ruined. It's fear of the unknown. Humans don't know shit, so we create these abstractions like reason or freedom to feel as if we know shit, to feel like we're going somewhere. But ultimately, we can't prove anything. I can't prove I exist. I can't prove anything exists. Should we believe in nothing because to believe in anything would be to commit to the bit? Or should we commit to the bit, knowing full well everything is balls deep in histories of oppression and British people? Or maybe there's a difference between not believing anything and believing in nothing.
Jefferson has beliefs, Burr has none.
I take believing in things very seriously. Some may say I'm one of the best to ever do it. No one's ever believed harder than I have. And it's because of this that I've come to believe in nothing. I don't want to believe in nothing. That feels ontologically evil to me. No, I want to commit to the bit. But really, there's no proof that anything exists. Like, everything could be a lie, and there's no way of knowing that. So if I can't prove that anything exists, how can I even begin to make something as complicated as a moral claim? What is the good? What is the bad? Well, first, what is? I don't know, and we'll never know. We're just gonna have to deal with that. But how do we deal with each other? How do we do politics when we believe in nothing? So no, I'm not gonna do Jürgen Habermas's dirty work and try to save the liberal Enlightenment project. I don't care about saving any political ideology. I just have to believe, without justification, that there is a truth. Somehow. You want to get to the heart of Hamilton, don't you? Well, first, we have to take out the trash. How do we separate truth from non-truth in a society too cool, too postmodern, and too apathetic for universals? For the better part of the 20th century, post-structuralist philosophy, or as some like to call it, postmodern philosophy, has been yelling at a wall about the fact that everything is a social construct in a way that sucks. Post-structuralism has been hugely influential in the creation of some of today's most hated philosophies. Critical race theory, gender studies, postmodern neo-Marxism, intersectionality, all in some way claim that society is made up of a certain antagonism, by struggle and conflict, and that, because of historical reasons, some people are winners and some people are losers, and that generally, society is set up in a way to keep winners winning. To the point where even our systems of knowledge, our institutions, everything takes on the perspective of the winners. There are social mechanisms hard at work to make it seem as if the winning perspective is universal, eternal, and natural. Now, some might say that this kind of sounds like Marxism, but in a cute cultural way. And that's only a little bit true. There's a crucial difference between postmodern versions of this story and, say, a Marxist version of this story. A Marxist looks at the world and claims that class conflict is a kind of universal trans-historical element at the root of all world historical events. Struggle is economic struggle. Marxists interpret the struggles of our time through a framework of conflict between those who control the means of economic production and those who don't. A Marxist fights in the name of human emancipation through the lens of class conflict. Marxism organizes social patterns into a coherent story about class. But some people, for understandable reasons, want to complicate the story. A post-structuralist or postmodern thinker might say, hey, this grand narrative of class conflict can't really be applied in a universal, trans-historical way. Meaning is highly contextual and constantly subject to change. Marxist activists claim to fight in the name of a human subject that must be liberated from capitalism. But postmodernists complicate this whole idea of a human subject itself. After all, can human emancipation ever be truly universal if the model of humanity that Marx uses is the same Enlightenment conception of the human that was constructed in a racial, patriarchal, and elitist context? Maybe there isn't one subject of history. Maybe there's a bunch of local and particular struggles, local and particular discourses and histories, all that deserve a more specific analysis of the struggles particular to them. That's a compelling enough, if albeit simplistic, critique of Marx, even if you don't agree, right? And it's addictive. I could critique all day. What if everything is nothing? I mean, there's no reason for anything to be anything, right? What if everything isn't anything anywhere except nothing everywhere? If we commit to one framework, if we commit to the bit, what do we miss? What if there's things unaccounted for? What if I'm just following some ideological trick? We don't have access to the true nature of reality. There are no categories outside of human understanding. Nature doesn't give us direction. The mess of material reality presents itself to conscious beings, and conscious beings invent patterns and categories to make sense of reality. If everything is a social construct, then every concept, every category, every ounce of meaning in this world is just social diarrhea. People in the social field agreeing that we should call pee and poo. And sometimes they disagree. The social field is a site of conflict. Different people fighting for their version of reality to become the dominant version of reality. Should poo be poo? Prove it. Prove it right now that poo is poo. In the stupid version of the story, you might be tempted to claim that nothing exists, everything is fake, so let's just party. But that doesn't do justice to the ramifications. Things do exist, but to exist is to be the universe's cuckold. To exist is to exist for a consciousness, to exist for our categories and established knowledge. Existence is a pathetic attempt at becoming real. To exist is to be impure, to be tainted by human understanding and language. Yet we seek existence so that we can become intelligible, understandable to others, but we pay the price by becoming limited by the boundary that gets us there. Our declarations of existence are just psychological limit lines that separate the atoms of our bodies from others, an eternal investment in a boundary for the chance to be. And what is the return? Are you following? It doesn't matter. You can go down the hole forever and try proving any of it wrong. I dare you. If any of this is wrong, prove to me right now that you exist. Come, punch me in the face right now. Do it. I'll wait. First person to move is gay. Now, most people don't live inside the big wet postmodern hole. Most people believe things. But it's all cope. Be honest with yourself, it's cope. If you live in a liberal secular democracy, one that ostensibly values pluralism and multiculturalism, then society doesn't really give you one grand story to follow. At least not explicitly. There isn't a king telling you who the gods are. You can mostly believe whatever you want. Though racism and xenophobia is an integral feature of the modern world, most Western liberal governments, on paper, aim to be multicultural and pluralistic societies. Governments are run in a way that accounts for and accepts the plurality of meaning. Liberal society is set up in a way that expects people with different cultures and backgrounds to be able to come together in the same society, even if they hold fundamentally different beliefs. Which, to be clear, is cool and awesome. Diverse, multicultural societies, rock and roll. But there isn't one story anymore. We're not all going to die in battle for a king. There's no revolution in the name of liberty. We're not all going to church. In a postmodern world, the individual has to make meaning for themselves. And nowadays, people subscribe to different beliefs like commodities. In a world without unity, there's a plurality of seductive particulars at our fingertips. Today's social critics claim that we live in a cold, dead, and meaningless society. This is wildly untrue. There's an excess of meaning. Every day we see hundreds of advertisements trying to sell us their version of a grand story. Become loyal to this beloved franchise, this sports team. Subscribe to my Patreon for the Marxist Revolution. Hey gamers, are you a fan of Taylor Swift? Don't forget to follow The Crown, the official podcast. Price match at Walmart. Buy, subscribe, follow, like. There's so much goddamn meaning everywhere. So many different things to feel all the time. So no, our world isn't cold and dead and barren. Meaning is whatever you want it to be. And it sucks. It's overwhelming. Our hormones are all over the place. What we don't have is direction. Well, I guess we kind of picked West. As the 20th century saw the fall of fascist and communist states, Western liberal democracies stood triumphant. By the close of the 20th century, Western liberalism appeared to be the only thing that could triumph. Fukuyama's famous 1989 essay epitomized this sentiment in its famous title, The End of History. Question mark? Is this it? Is this what society is gonna look like for, ever? As the famous quote goes, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than an end to capitalism. I don't know how to cite it. It's attributed to 3 different people. Oh god, please don't tell H-Bomber. If liberalism feels like it's not going anywhere, then of course people are going to make up a place to go. People really like extremist ideologies because it gives them direction. Marxism helps us imagine a more just future. Fascism appeals to those who want to return to a great mythical past. There's always somewhere to go, something to aspire to. On the other hand, contemporary liberal societies are timeless. There's no end, there's no future. When people claim that capitalism is just an expression of human nature and greed, it even denies that we ever had a past. We try to naturalize capitalism, make it seem inevitable. History doesn't happen anymore. Now we just exist. Everything is pastiche. Every aesthetic is nostalgia. Wait, but it can't end this way, right? Liberalism is rooted in oppressive European histories and structural violence. It's ill-equipped to solve the climate crisis. The profit motive makes my balls itch, so what? We turn back to Marxism? Flaws and all, it seemed to have been the only historical force capable of overcoming liberalism that wasn't fascism. But if everything is a social construct and meaning is contingent, how can we be sure to trust any grand unifying theory when all these grand unifying theories have resulted in totalitarianism or structural violence or itchy balls? Okay, so let's not believe in anything and do nothing. But wait, that sucks too. If we do nothing, then we allow the status quo to continue in all of its violences. Even if it feels like liberalism gives no meaning or direction at the individual level, the liberal state certainly takes its own direction. There are material inequalities that it purposefully does not address. There are exploitative global relationships that maintain the liberal state of affairs in the Western world. To invoke the uncertainty of truth as justification for doing nothing is to allow the violence of the status quo to continue. We need truth. Post-truth isn't working. Misinformation, right-wing populism, radicalization, post-truth isn't working. We need a way to approach truth that isn't totalizing, but that still manages to be universally true. One that understands how the dominant class influences the creation of knowledge, but that still believes that there's a truth beyond the dominant class. In the leftist perspective, accepting the radically antagonistic, that is, political character of social life, accepting the necessity of taking sides is the only way to be effectively universal. Remember that 45-minute vlog from earlier with the philosophers yelling at each other over philosophical truth? That was a film by philosopher Alain Badiou. Badiou wasn't like other girls. He was a committed communist and marched with his students in May 1968 during the leftist uprisings in Paris. But while a lot of other commie philosophers of his day got sucked into the everything is a social construct grind, Badiou found his way to some sort of truth. You know when your well-meaning 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Lady, said something like, "Knowledge is power," in an attempt to extol the path towards higher education? Well, she was right. In an ontologically evil way. Knowledge is power, and that kinda sucks. Knowledge is not the structured pursuit of truth. Badiou claims knowledge and truth are two radically different things. Knowledge is a way of organizing everything according to a consistent set of rules. But the people who control the means of producing the rules for knowledge tend to be the people in power, the ruling class. Because of this, knowledge is static. It's the repetition of old, unchanging rules. It's the site of cold objectivity that reproduces traditional ways of doing things. Procedure, repetition, calculation. Truth, however, is another matter entirely. Truth is rupture, innovation, creation. Truth is always new. It always breaks with the old system of knowledge, causing a paradigm shift into a new system of knowledge. Think Isaac Newton. For centuries, physicists and scientists relied on Newton's laws of motion. They're elegant, they worked, and so they became knowledge. Newtonian gravity was the establishment physicist's friend. Newtonian gravity made total sense. Until it didn't. Suddenly, big balls were moving in a way people couldn't understand. The math wasn't mathing, and there opened an opportunity for rupture. In comes Einstein with his theory of relativity, a new framework for understanding gravity which fundamentally shifted the way scientists understand it. This was a moment of truth, born out of a moment when the existing system of knowledge encountered something it couldn't account for. This isn't science building on previous science in a linear fashion. It is a complete upheaval of the previous regime. Truth happens in moments in time when the existing system of knowledge doesn't work, requiring an entire shift in how ideas are organized. Truth is a slap in the face, a punch in the gut. And this isn't just about science. Love, art, politics are all sites of truth. Moments when people declare faith to a genuinely universal, genuinely rupturing idea that breaks with the status quo. Every system of knowledge has things that can't be accounted for. We're humans. We're limited in our ability to account for everything. The status quo, organized by a particular system of knowledge, always represses some unaccountable point. The unnameable, the uncategorizable, the void, the losers declared dead by the winners. But despite the power of knowledge to feel totalizing, there are inevitable moments in history when the status quo can no longer hide what has been hidden. A moment of chance called the event that reveals the truth of a given historical situation. Think Einstein, think the French Revolution, moments when the repressed returns and in response individuals or collectives of people decide that this is the moment that it's all going to change. The status quo, or the state of the situation, the state of affairs, the dominant paradigm, knowledge, whatever you want to call it, there's always something these dominant paradigms can't account for. And when we encounter the thing that the status quo can't account for, we encounter the status quo's limit, and therefore some kind of truth about the situation itself. If we understand what it is that the system is trying to repress, then we get to the heart of its fundamental conflicts. Since most of you are gay people, let's go with the gay example. The gay event, the Stonewall riots.
To briefly recount, in June of 1969, after a police raid at a gay bar in New York City called the Stonewall Inn, the bar's queer patrons, especially the poor trans people of color with nothing left to lose, rose up against a social order that had declared to them undesirable excess. Queer people were the uncategorizable, the unnameable, the void of the existing heterosexual institution. Frustrated with the state of affairs, thousands of people gathered for riots and protests that lasted for several days, and once the riots dissipated, this burst of energy transformed into new LGBT+ activist organizations armed with a new radical gay consciousness. But it's not as if LGBT plus activism didn't exist before 1969. Before Stonewall, there was a vibrant gay activist community across the United States. The Eastern Regional Conference of Homophile Organizations was established in 1962. The Janus Society, also 1962. The Daughters of Bilitis, 1955, and the Mattachine Society, 1950. And these people didn't just sit around and act fruity. They organized protests, founded important publications, and battled in courts. But despite all the gay activism that preceded it, Stonewall is still seen as the catalyst event for the gay rights movement, the turning point in queer history. But it wasn't even the first queer uprising against the police. In 1959, you had the riot at Cooper's Donuts in LA. In 1966, you had the Compton Cafeteria riot in San Francisco. And in 1967, protests against raids at the Black Cat Tavern in LA. Stonewall wasn't the first queer uprising, and it wasn't the last. So why does it anchor our understanding of queer history? Why does Stonewall get all the books and that one terrible movie? Because it was the event, the moment of truth. How? Take a look at this activist leaflet printed by gay activist organization the Mattachine Society before the Stonewall riots. Homosexuals are different, but we believe that the homosexual has the right to live, work, and participate in a free society. Cute message, right? That was the climate of gay activism before Stonewall. Members of the Mattachine Society weren't ashamed of who they were, but they weren't necessarily fighting society head-on. They wanted to become members of society in the same way heterosexuals could. They wanted to be recognized by the existing situation. So what changed after Stonewall? Well, here's a poster from 1970 promoting a special march to commemorate the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots called Christopher Street Liberation Day. It was basically the first of what we know today to be pride parades. The language of this document is totally different. Homosexuals at last have realized they will never be able to be liberated by politely asking the system. Freedom is never given, it must be taken. It is the system itself which persecutes us. Compare that to the Mattachine Society, who said that they wanted to defend the rights of homosexuals. The Gay Liberation Front wanted to fight for the right to be something radically different. Pre-Stonewall activists declared that homosexuals are different, but we're still polite, but we're still citizens, but we're still human. Just a few years later, the post-Stonewall Gay Liberation Front's new ethos declared that homosexuals are different and it makes us stronger, and we're going to fight, and nothing can stop us. Stonewall was an event of truth, a moment in which we come to understand queerness not as another identity marker that needs to be integrated within the current political system, not as the fight for the rights of one particular group, but queerness as the tools and materials from which we build a radically different society. Let's organize our disruption into new cultural consciousness. Instead of wondering how we can change queerness to fit the mold of society, we must now use what it means to be queer to make a new world. Homosexuals, bisexuals, pansexuals, trans people, all queer people are different. And truth is just a possibility, a come hither from the universe that beckons us to follow the ruins of the event. Our job is to yes and the universe. The truth is not something we can understand or something we can logically prove. Proving and understanding, that's knowledge's job. Truth is a commitment to an unnameable break, and it's our job to commit to the bit.
America's revolution sucked. On the other hand, the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, now those are revolutions. Those truly turned the world upside down. Just wow. Yes, isn't it the type of thing that makes you want to kiss and hold hands with a boy? Just me. For those who aren't American, I'll recap what happened. Well, if you received an American education, you might want to listen up too. Back in the 16th century, the British decided that they wanted to own the world, and so they stole a bunch of territories through bloodshed and genocide. One of these territories was the 13 colonies in North America. The Anglos who ended up living in these colonies didn't really like all the taxes and restrictions on their lives, especially since they didn't have representation in British Parliament. So these guys, who called themselves Americans, declared their independence, leading to a spat of white-on-white violence that culminated in the establishment of the United States of America. Why is this story retold over and over again? Is there something exceptional about the American experiment, or is this story's totalizing presence the product of American global hegemony? There's this tendency in American historiography to paint the early American Republic as this cool place where people had an exceptional level of equality and independence compared to the rest of the world, which was actually kind of true. If you're stupid. Okay, to be fair, even before the Revolution, America didn't have aristocracies in the same way many European states did. But America wasn't some egalitarian paradise where you could vape in the face of all the babies you wanted to. Let's put aside the fact that there were hundreds of thousands of enslaved people, or that women couldn't own property. The American elite was very much a thing, including rich merchants and industrialists in the North, and aristocratic slave-owning families in the South, who, again, literally owned people. The American Revolution did nothing to fundamentally shift this hierarchy. Even if the American Revolution pledged fidelity to Enlightenment ideas of individual rights and democratic governance that certainly had potential, the Revolution and the Constitution were ultimately a conservative project. Or was it? Wait, was it? America bad? Or is there more to it than that? Hey, what's this stupid doodle? This is one of the most famous pieces of propaganda produced during the American Revolution. The artist, Paul Revere. Revere's engraving depicts the events of the Boston Massacre, where, on March 5th, 1770, an angry crowd of colonists gathered around a group of British soldiers. As the mob grew in numbers and hostility, the soldiers fired into the crowd, killing 5 colonists. What do you see in Paul Revere's famous engraving? Well-dressed gentlemen standing peacefully? Shadowy British faces firing mercilessly? Well, these people do not exist. These weren't the faces that led the Boston Massacre. Instead, it was poor workers and sailors, multi-ethnic and multiracial revolutionaries at the front lines of the revolt. The first death at the Boston Massacre, in fact, the first death of the entire American Revolution, was of a formerly enslaved sailor named Crispus Attucks, depicted here in J.H. Buford's 1856 lithograph. But Attucks and other proletarian sailors' existence was a threat to the revolution that men like Paul Revere wanted to sell. Attucks was the void, the unnameable, the uncategorizable truth of the American Revolution. The heart of the American Revolution wasn't people like Hamilton, Jefferson, or Madison. It was Attucks. In the book, The Many-Headed Hydra, historian Marcus Rediker illustrates the hidden history of the revolutionary Atlantic. From the 1740s to the 1770s, mobs of rioting seamen, poor workers, free and enslaved people of color engaged in violent direct action against the British government. These weren't one-off moments. These were the essential catalyst moments that directly led to the American War of Independence. In the 18th century, American ports were a sanctuary for the poor, runaway slaves, and free people of color. With a strong sense of radical governments, these groups of people, often labeled the Motley Crew, used the Enlightenment language of revolution, liberty, and human rights in their rebellions against British forces. Early in the Revolution, these mobs provided the spark that later founding fathers formalized into political discourse, as was the case when Samuel Adams claimed that these mobs embodied the fundamental rights of man. The Motley Crew were the instigators of key moments like the Boston Massacre or the burning of the British vessel Gaspee. These were some of the most important acts of violence that led to the Revolutionary War. Even as these moments of direct action inched the colonies closer to independence and nationhood, conservative forces in the 1780s began to turn against these revolutionary mobs by disparaging their character as ignorant rabble-rousers of lesser status. Moderate American patriots condemned the same mobs that first incited the American Revolution in the first place. You can find early moderate fears against mobs and rebellions throughout the constitutions, where the framers literally tried their damned hardest to suppress democratic popular influence and protect elite property-owning interests. If it weren't for the goddamn Motley Crue, we'd be speaking British. The Motley Crue had worldwide influence as well. When these American proletarian and multi-ethnic sailors traveled across the Atlantic for work, they spread revolutionary ideals throughout the region as they told stories of rebellions and new ideas. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution erupted in a connected historical network inspired by the same Enlightenment principles popularized and put into action by America's early proletarians. Enlightenment rationalism, universalism, the idea of a political subject of history born with natural rights, these ideas used to rock. But nowadays, if you hear someone unironically calling themselves a classical liberal, they usually just hate people of color. Yet in the 18th century, in an age of aristocracies, monarchies, and slave societies, liberalism inspired a generation of revolutions. The French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution both contested the hierarchical and oppressive conditions of their time. They were events that revealed some element that the system tried to repress. The humanity of the enslaved peoples of Saint-Domingue, the power of the people as a political force in France. These were moments of genuine rupture inspired by Enlightenment philosophy. Liberalism's great accomplishment was in its formalizing of the people as a source of political legitimacy. Not a god, not a king, but the people. That is liberalism's great truth. For Badu, truth is an ongoing process. Truth isn't one thing we can understand or articulate or hold in our hands. We remain faithful to the events of truth throughout our lives, through generations, and renew these truths as history evolves. Truths are universal, but they can't be understood. Truths are specific to the historical event, but can be eternally renewed.
It is based on some beautiful ideals, and it has never reached those ideals. You know, to say all men are created equal and not have all men be equal, even at your founding, is to constantly be reaching for ideals that are out of reach.
There's an obvious truth within the philosophies that we call liberalism. Universalism, liberty, the consent of the governed, those are ideas that people have powerfully mobilized in the name of their emancipation.
When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
And even if today's liberal states don't live up to these ideals in practice,
it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned.
They pledge fidelity to their nation's founding events. They pledge fidelity to something that is fundamentally at least in bed with truth.
We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
When the creators of Hamilton repeat the phrase,
"This is the story of America then, told by America now. This is the story of America then, told by America now. And tell the story of America then, told by America now. It's a story of America then, told by America now.
It's a story about America then.
Told by America now."
Well, is it? America has always looked like the cast of Hamilton. The American Revolution wasn't a simple elite rebellion, although our histories and counter-histories tell us so. The spark of the void lies within every genuinely revolutionary moment. The unnameable, the transient, those who the system refuses to represent. That is the America then that I believe in. But what about America now? With the election of Barack Obama in 2008, American hubris climbed as high as the stock market fell to the ground.
The politics of racial grievance died tonight.
The world needs to have more respect for the United States.
Criticism of the United States for being a racist nation will now stop, right?
Sure.
Got white guilt? Vote Hussein Osama Biden.
With the racialized system of mass incarceration peaking in 2009, Americans of color bearing the weight of the 2008 financial crisis, educational segregation growing more severe than it was in the 60s, and the unrelenting wealth gap between white and black Americans, all the Democratic Party could offer was hope. First black president, right? Racism over, right? To the Democrats' credit, Obama implemented major legislation that did materially benefit low-income Americans, namely the Affordable Care Act. But post-financial crisis, a lot of Americans felt that the liberal system was ineffective in implementing the necessary mass change that was needed. Wealth inequality, factories closing, $6 footlong. How long can you tell Americans to stay invested in the fight for progress when they can't even feed their families? So of course, politics took a shift. But why did American politics take the turn that it did, that it is taking? Why is it that we got Black Thomas Jefferson the same year that we got Orange Man Bad? If we want to understand the post-Obama world, the post-Hamilton world, then we have to understand the pre-Obama world. We have to go back. Remember how I mentioned that liberal Enlightenment principles can devolve into false universalism? You know, when arguing for human rights, Enlightenment philosophers and liberal states often articulated and applied these rights and universal freedoms in a way that positioned whiteness as the universal category. In practice and in theory, humanness became synonymous with whiteness and maleness. So-called democratic states in the 18th and 19th century used this logic to justify the oppression and genocide of non-white, non-male people by labeling them less than human. The American system of governance was structured in a way that enshrined the interests of white property-owning males as universal interests. The government claimed to be a government for the people, but really protected racial and patriarchal status quos. And keeping that in mind, let me offer you a little history of the present. The middle of America's 20th century was mired with crisis. The Great Depression in the 1930s left millions in poverty, and World War II in the 1940s sent thousands of men abroad to fight in a global war. During these times of crisis, U.S. policymakers wanted to stimulate economic growth by attempting a massive wealth transfer that would grip American fantasy for decades to come. Together, the New Deal and the Fair Deal programs of the 1930s and 40s injected over $100 billion into the pockets of American families, providing opportunities for skills training, education, home loans, and entrepreneurship. Or at least, it would if Congress could convince Southern Democrats to play along. Southern politicians didn't want to give up on the Southern way of life, what we call the Jim Crow system of racial segregation today. So Congress made a deal. Southern Democrats would vote in favor of massive progressive policy on the condition that these programs be applied in a way that didn't interfere with Southern racial hierarchy. What did this mean? Well, give racially segregated states local control over how to distribute benefits. That way, they could maintain the discriminatory status quo. This discrimination worked in subtle ways, by denying benefits to the work sectors that were dominated by African Americans, or denying black veterans job opportunities supposedly guaranteed by legislation. Southern states ensured that this massive wealth transfer only benefited the white middle class. In 1947, out of the 3,229 farm loans distributed in Mississippi, only 2 went to black veterans. And it wasn't just the South. In northern cities, racist redlining policies labeled non-white, especially black communities, as risky real estate investments, preventing a generation of Americans of color from accessing home loans and upward mobility. New suburban communities in the North explicitly barred non-white people from purchasing homes. The conservative fantasy of the prosperous 1950s suburb was not the natural result of American capitalism. It wasn't a result of American values or religiosity. The American post-war dream was an exceptional and artificial moment crafted by intense government subsidies into the white middle class. But despite this being a relatively short period in American history, it certainly hasn't left the white American imagination. As economic prosperity for the white middle class continued into the 1960s, urban black communities faced deteriorating socioeconomic conditions. In 1964, nearly half of the black population lived in poverty. To help address this disproportionate economic burden, President Lyndon B. Johnson launched social programs known as the War on Poverty, with special attention to black communities. Despite these initial efforts, the U.S.'s campaign in Vietnam diverted government funds from welfare, and social tensions came to a boil during the long, hot summer of 1967. Race riots spread throughout the country as young black Americans expressed their frustration at a system unable to address the nation's material neglect. Fearful white conservatives and moderates felt that Johnson's liberal social programs promoted racial anarchy and unfair handouts to black communities. But of course, we have to remember, white people already got their handouts with FDR and Truman, so whenever the state even attempted to support non-white communities, there was backlash. The economy didn't improve either. Economic bullshit and the oil crisis in the 70s led to inflation and unemployment. Americans started to doubt the ability of interventionist programs like the Great Society in confronting contemporary problems. So, in comes Ronald Reagan. His anti-big government message resonated with voters, and his anti-welfare stance appealed to white Americans who didn't want their tax dollars to go to the racialized caricature of the undeserving poor that Reagan strategically perpetuated. Let me emphasize that. Reagan and other conservatives used white American racism to villainize the welfare state as this institution that gives out handouts to welfare queens, aka black people. But it was this same welfare state that helped the white middle class access status in the first place. Hello? Overall, in the late 20th century, American politics took a new approach called neoliberalism. This time, the free market will save us. The government doesn't solve problems, it is the problem.
We're also coming to understand that our welfare system weakens community values and self-esteem.
Cut welfare, cut taxes, cut social spending. Even the Democrats got in on it.
From now on, our nation's answer to this great social challenge will no longer be a never-ending cycle of welfare. It will be the dignity, the power, and the ethic of work.
In the 1990s, the Clinton administration embraced cuts to welfare, economic deregulation, and globalized free markets. Woo! Economy! Yeah! Woo! Free market! Oh God. Oh no! Not all was well in neoliberal land. With policies like NAFTA, many U.S. manufacturing jobs moved out of the United States, leaving working-class people across the country out of work. The Great Recession in the late 2000s dealt U.S. manufacturing a final blow. While liberal Democrats could not effectively address the effects of financial meltdown and deindustrialization, they at least tried to offer hope.
Yes, we can.
Working-class voters followed Obama's lead and voted for him in droves. But as his term continued along, for many Americans it wasn't enough. Top income earners saw income and wealth rise while working-class people lost and lost. And for many white Americans raised in a nation that previously subsidized their status, the sudden dramatic loss of status from the 2008 financial crisis left an impression. Liberal Democrats couldn't address many of the material and structural problems that caused the financial crisis and increasing wealth inequality. Like their Republican peers, they still believed in the neoliberal order, albeit with more regulations in place. But Democrats needed a way to distinguish themselves, a way to convince the public that the Democrats truly believed in a progressive America. So liberal Democrats decided to emphasize important social issues instead. Racial equality, marriage equality, environmental justice, reproductive rights.
Racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic.
Of course, these are all real issues whose core claims have the potential to genuinely challenge the status quo. Racial justice seeks material redistribution. Queer movements seek the deconstruction of the capitalist family unit. Environmental justice criticizes the destructive nature of profit incentives. But Democrats didn't address the core subversive potential of these movements. All they could offer was the belief that these movements were compatible with the American institution, and that through these movements, the institution could get better, hopefully. And Hamilton ties all these beliefs together into one product. What better encapsulation of Obama-optimism than the show inspired and cultivated by Obama himself. Hamilton encapsulates 2010's democratic beliefs in progress. Open the institution, make our history contemporary, diversify who gets to claim our story. The epilogue of Hamilton, the Revolution, quotes Obama's speech at the 2004 Democratic Convention and practically claims this vision as its own. There's not a black America and white America
and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Liberals believe that there's something about the American experiment that's worth preserving. This book about the musical's creation is called Hamilton, the Revolution, yet it proudly calls the musical traditional. However innovative Obama's speeches and Lynn's show might seem, they are in fact traditional. They don't reinvent the American character, they renew it. This is literally the same framework Obama writes about in his autobiography, Audacity of Hope. In it, Obama recalls someone asking him, "Why do you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics?" And Obama offers this in response. "I understand the skepticism, but there was, and always has been, another tradition to politics. A tradition based on the simple idea that we have a stake in one another, and that what binds us together is greater than what drives us apart, and that if enough people believe in the truth of that proposition and act on it, then we might not solve every problem, but we might get something meaningfully done." Hamilton spoke to the heart of the liberal project of the turn of the 2010s. It carries its essence.
We may not live to see the glory, as the song from the musical Hamilton goes. Let us gladly join the fight.
A belief that the institution can ceaselessly run towards some beautiful, unified American vision. And that's nice. That's sweet. But what is America? What has America always been? Can it be anything else? Through the 2010s, minority representation in the media increased significantly. With this increased attention on racial and progressive issues, a lot of white Americans perceived all this racial politics as a zero-sum game that they were losing. Even though there haven't been any recent large-scale redistributive policy efforts to address racial inequality in the United States, there's actually research to show that white Americans tend to believe that decreases in anti-black bias correlates with increases in anti-white bias, and that this is what's happening. But of course, that's not what's happening. Black Americans never experienced the scale of wealth transfer that white Americans experienced in the mid-20th century. In fact, the conservative turn towards laissez-faire neoliberalism in the late 20th century undid all the infrastructure that made the 1950s possible for the white middle class. Yet they cling so dearly to the very thing they destroyed. That dream is gone. It's dead. Neoliberalism killed it, and the white middle class called the hit. But if you're a poor white conservative, is that what you see? All this talk about racial issues and gays, what about me? Why haven't my wages gone up? Why are all the signs in Spanish, and why is my president black? This isn't the America I know. This isn't my America. And so the working class whites who believed in Obama's promises, who voted for hope, put that hope into someone else.
The American dream is dead. Bring it back. But if I get elected president, I will bring it back. Bigger and better and stronger than ever before, and we will make America great again.
You know the story. Donald Trump overturns the American political scene with a right-wing populist fervor. He comes to signify America's dark shadow: anti-institutionalism, racial resentment, xenophobia, Christian nationalism.
America first. I am your voice. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing crime, they're rapists. I have seen firsthand how the system is rigged against our citizens. I alone can fix it.
And it's not entirely about what Trump actually does. Obama technically deported undocumented immigrants at higher rates than Trump. But Trump didn't work with reality. He spoke to fantasy. Conservative white Americans cling to that racialized fantasy, despite the fact that in the name of returning to a fantastical past, they voted for all the tax cuts, welfare cuts, and neoliberal austerity measures that killed it.
The free world must embrace its national foundations. It must not attempt to erase them or replace them. The true good of a nation can only be pursued by those who love it, by citizens who are rooted in its history.
Which is strange to say, because isn't that what Hamilton and or Obama was all about? Renew tradition, embrace our history? But this is different. This is all about symbols and signifiers. To be a Trump supporter rooted in this nation's history is to identify with the white patriarch for which this nation was built. White, property-owning males and their families. If the Obama-Hamilton liberals want to open the nation's promise to many, the Trump populists want to keep that promise in its traditional place. Wait, populism? What's populism?
Traditionally, populism is defined as a type of politics that characterizes the social field as a split between the regular people and an enemy elite. So when Trump says something like,
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost.
He's engaging in populist rhetoric. He's creating a dichotomy between a small group of powerful elites and the people whom they cuck. And this exists on the left wing as well. Bernie Sanders articulates a similar anti-establishment message.
They want a government which represents all of us, not just the people on top.
Populism isn't left or right. It's a mode of action that engages the people against a powerful elite force. And the people are engaged, all right. Just as liberals in the 20th century claimed the end of history for themselves, populists in the 21st century have taken back governments across the world. The 20th century experiment in neoliberalism has failed, populists say. Globalism and economic liberalization have only worked for the homosexual elites. We have been left behind. Oftentimes, people attempt to pathologize or diagnose populism as if it's some dangerous aberration that we need to tame. Is populism a fluke? Maybe it's just a radical burst of energy, and that's all well and good, but now it's time to grow up and get back to the real politics. Process, law, order, policy, procedure, right? Or maybe not. In the book On Populist Reason, Ernesto Laclau decided to think of populism in a different way. He argues that populism isn't just a strain of politics, it isn't a departure from politics proper. Rather, populism is the essence of politics. Populism is politics in its most naked form. Populism, and therefore politics itself, is the process of constituting the people as a universal political subject. That is politics, the logic which creates the people and articulates their demands as the people. Populism arises through a chain of equivalence. To understand that, you have to understand that Laclau conceived of the social field as a struggle for meaning. Words don't have any inherent meaning, right? Meaning is the result of different social groups fighting for the right to decide meaning for everyone else. But the fight over the meaning of words isn't frivolous. The fight for meaning has material effects. How a government understands the meaning of the word freedom or citizen will directly affect how it approaches policy, who gets rights, who lives, and who dies. In a capitalist society, freedom might mean the ability to choose from every possible flavor of Oreo that can be thought into existence. In a communist society, freedom might mean the ability for society to vote on the best few Oreo flavors that would benefit the common good. The ability to define freedom, to define how freedom works in practice based on this definition, is extremely powerful. Words and symbols organize reality, not just in a conceptual linguistic way, but in a very material, intentional way. Populism describes the way politics works in a discursive field. So basically in the realm of words, symbols, and speaking and writing and all that stuff. Populism takes a bunch of different particular demands, for example, gay rights, climate change, healthcare reform, and it links these different demands through a chain of equivalence. Populism creates a through line between different demands, making these different struggles appear as one struggle on behalf of the people. That is the core of politics. Politics, the great and eternal struggle for power between groups, masses, collectives. It requires that individuals come together and form common identities. Politics is populist reason. But politics is breathing its dying breath. In modern liberal democracies, we let institutions anticipate popular demands, and institutions address these demands in their own technocratic way. Whether or not that's good or bad, that's not politics. Technocratic calculation and bureaucratic management isn't politics. But modern liberal democracies eat that shit for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Or in the case of Democrats, brunch. Our big old liberal democracy killed politics. People, more like pee-poo, institutions run everything now. And usually it works, I guess, depending on your definition of works. You know, the FDA regulates our food. Something is happening to the money supply, I think, and lawyers are fighting for human rights somewhere, hopefully. Some social theorists call this state of affairs post-politics. In a post-political situation, there is no constitution of a people. There are only institutions who work at an institutional level, and individuals with individual needs and particular groups with particular needs. There is no universal people. There is no collective struggle. All that exists are the problems that we can see, and all that we can do is find the expert with the most pragmatic solution. Trust that the institution, the free market, or the state will eventually bend towards justice. Welcome to the end of history. But sometimes these institutions fail, and people die. And when they fail, popular movements spring up to react. Here's the thing, though. Populism isn't beautiful. It's ugly. And of course it is when it's often the last resort of a people who feel completely marginalized from the mainstream. Populism has historically required not only a common struggle, but a common enemy and a common hero. Onto whom can we project all of our problems? Onto whom shall we project all of our hopes? Surely enough, what starts as a hope for democratic fulfillment can easily devolve into an authoritarian nightmare. The Trump supporters, who were legitimately left behind by neoliberal policies, now rally against an immigrant enemy and follow their leader to the death. Democracy be damned. But this can't be it, right? This can't be the end of history. Let's say you're like me, and you think that it's possible to create a democratic society that isn't built off exploitation, profit, and suffering. Should we follow populism, risking the authoritarian, anti-empirical thrust we're witnessing today? Or should we continue the liberal state of affairs and let the world set itself on fire?
We think we live in a hyper-political age because of all the identity politics and the woke and the canceling and the culture wars and the everything. But no, that's not politics. That's what happens when meaning becomes a commodity we can buy and sell in the free market. That's pure reaction, pure biological stimulation and algorithmic addiction. What we need is a true universalism, a way to reconfigure all these particulars into a collective popular struggle. And I'm sorry, but it's gonna hurt. Progressive orthodoxy has taught all of us former Tumblr users that particulars rule. You know, listen to gay people about gay issues, or only this identity or that identity understands this struggle, or only this identity or that identity should have a voice. The online left often fetishizes oppression as if it were a commodity, because that's what it's become. Something on a list that conveys where you lie in a particular market. But that needs to end. Or not end, but change. We can't build a truth on particulars. We need a truth that isn't totalizing, a universalism that isn't centrist, and a politics that seeks to eliminate the illusion of essential difference without denying the importance of the history of difference. How? Hamilton may be liberal, it may be revisionist history, but it has the structure of political truth. Yes, it's a tacit endorsement of the liberal status quo, but it does it in such an effective way that it becomes the perfect model of what the political needs to be. There are 3 things to learn from Hamilton. There are 3 things you need to know. Number 1, the chain of equivalence.
Is that we're taking something that people feel so deeply. It resonates in us so deeply, the American journey, the struggles of the family, the fights of both independence and voice. Those are things that we all know in our DNA. We're just saying it in a way that feels new, but reminds us of something that we know already.
All great political movements are rooted in a historical event. If we want to understand the present, we have to understand our relationship to the past. Lin-Manuel Miranda's history isn't just about people doing stuff in an entertaining way. It's about essences. How to convey a pseudo-Hegelian transhistorical struggle towards universal spirit. Looking back at the initial sketches of the song My Shot, you can clearly see Miranda's thought process on the page. In My Shot, different characters rap about their hopes for their and their country's future on the eve of the American Revolution. Lafayette stands for the freedom fight, Lawrence for racial equality, and Mulligan for honorable self-sufficiency. Hamilton stands as Miranda's subject of truth. He isn't a character, he's a synthesis of all of America's most respectable hopes. He is the struggle for universal equality, the highest of all political aims. Miranda never set out to just tell Hamilton's story. He set out to tell a story about what he believed should be the essence of America, with Hamilton as the purest vessel.
Which is, we are just going to try to distill this story to its essence. It doesn't matter how well performed it is. It doesn't matter if it's from the writer. It needs to be only the essential moments that we need to dramatize.
He links Hamilton with America and America with the fight for universal equality. And he importantly links America with you, the people now, not the people then or the people of the future, but you. He exploits the American emotional attachment to its own mythology to create a chain of equivalence, to create a new myth that America is an ongoing project of popular emancipation.
America, you great unfinished symphony you sent for me.
America, you sent for me, us, the people. Lin-Manuel understands that the essence of politics is in the path to a common chain that creates a united people. And he found that through history, myth, and narrative.
You know, we've all grown up in the sort of descendants of this legacy of slavery, and we think, well, those are our narratives and that's our story. But the story of the creation of this country is our story too.
I don't exactly buy Miranda's liberal wet dream, but his version diverges from the traditional one in key ways. Liberalism killed history. It declared itself the end of history, but Miranda brought it back. He said, history will go on, and we will bring it to fruition. Though Miranda envisions a liberal democratic paradise, it's up to us to push this vision further. History is back on the table. The people are back on the table.
The show, at its core, can actually be distilled to an idea of understanding that your voice is important, that your story matters.
He wants you to take ownership of the American project. And maybe we should take pointers. Why have we let conservatives, racists, and ethno-nationalists to take ownership over the meaning of this country? They certainly aren't the ones that built it. I understand why we want to give up on America. Just open an American history book and you'll find a million reasons to give up on the American project. I know what America has stood for, what it stands for. Death and occupation in Gaza, racial injustice, settler colonialism, global capitalist exploitation. I could go on. But this also means that we are uniquely positioned as Americans to expose and reject this version of America. Instead of giving up on America, instead of calling for its destruction and waiting to see what rises from the ashes, what if we denounce America then and fight for an America now that is truly just? What if we had the audacity to hope, and to hope beyond Obama and Miranda's liberal vision? I don't know if I've given up on America, the people, the project, the idea. You know the America I f*** with? The motley crew of proletarian sailors who made the revolution possible. The labor movements, the arts, the Harlem Renaissance, jazz music, Broadway, rock and roll, Cajun food, comic books, Queens being the most ethnically diverse place in the world, Korean tacos, my friends, the people. How can we give up on the people? Number 2, identification with the symptom. Every society has its symptoms. The void, the excess, that which has no proper place and is thus said to embody all of society's negativity. You know them. The working class, the racialized, the queer, the undocumented, the unhoused. This uncategorizable excess, these points of impossibility, they reveal something fundamentally true about the world in which we live. They reveal that our universal principles aren't actually universal in how they're applied, that our ideas like freedom or individual rights have only worked in the service of particular dominant groups, that our institutions, which supposedly represent the people, were built to represent the few. If these points of exclusion actually represent the truth of our society, perhaps the political move then is towards what philosopher Slavoj Žižek calls identification with the symptom. Make the particular the universal. The working class, the racialized, the queer, the undocumented, the unhoused, those are the true universals, the essence of the nation. Why do you think Donald Trump was so effective? He identified a symptom and identified with it. Hey, forgotten working class, you are the nation. You are the elite.
The forgotten men and women of the United States are forgotten no more. They talk about the elite, the elite. Do you ever see the elite? They're not elite. You're the elite. You are the elite.
And through this process, he accidentally grazes the truth that neoliberalism has failed the working class, that it hasn't produced widespread prosperity. Yet the Democrats' response to MAGA Republicans has been to disavow the symptom as a racist aberration that we have to overcome with stronger institutions.
You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Now, some of those folks, they are irredeemable, but thankfully they are not America.
But that's literally the worst thing you could possibly do. White working class frustrations aren't aberrations. They speak to the heart of America's systemic failures. The state subsidized white America with progressive wealth transfer in the 20th century, and then it scared white voters into associating progressive wealth transfer with people of color. The working class white voters' frustrations, as misguided as they are the symptoms that speak to the truth of our collective history. Why do you think Hamilton was so effective? Republicans complained about a black Little Mermaid, so how did they let globalists get away with Black Thomas Jefferson? Because Miranda identified America with the symptom, the immigrant, the Americans of color, the poor. He turned these forgotten American excesses into American essences. Hamilton, this synthesis of the American struggle for universal equality, is also an immigrant, an orphan, and yet he is still, at his essence, the people. The casting of non-white actors, again, declares the void to be the universal, a fulfillment of Miranda's version of American history. The symptom not only comes to embody the universal, but this engagement with history as American history pulls at the emotional heartstrings necessary to tie the chain of equivalence together. America's marginalized excesses become the vanguard of the American people. Symptoms become symbols. These identifications can be limited. Trump's symptom takes us to authoritarian fascism. Miranda's liberal identification brings us closer to an American liberal vision. Both of them are effective at accomplishing their goals. The question is, are these the right goals? Our answer is not to dismiss the symptom. It's to take the symptom all the way. How can we make particular struggles into universal struggles? Take the struggle for trans rights. Republicans say that trans people are aberrations. They're everything wrong with the West. They're today's degenerates.
No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago.
In response, it would be understandable for one to take the trans movement in a traditional liberal direction. You know, to argue that trans people aren't deviant, to declare that trans rights are human rights, and to advocate for our full integration into an existing political structure. But how do we instead take the symptom all the way? We have to show the truth behind the marginalization of trans people. that we live in a system that unjustly regulates our relationship to our bodies, whether you're trans or cis. And to fight this, we must argue that actually there are no gendered essences, that no one is born in the wrong body or the right body, that we are all, in a way, transgender, that all people, whether cis or trans, live in a society that imposes gendered bodily norms, and that we all struggle to fit into these norms, that trans people are the vanguard for full sex and gender liberation.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this?
Did you know that in the United States, 146 out of 150 gender-affirming surgeries performed for people under 18 was breast reduction for cis male kids with gynecomastia? Both cis and trans people modify their bodies. Both struggle against gendered norms. The struggle for trans liberation is a struggle for universal gender liberation, a struggle for the freedom to choose one's gendered path. We can apply this logic to a variety of struggles. As liberals or leftists, it might feel awkward to universalize struggles that we've been told are only effective when we highlight the experiences of marginalized particulars. But universal, popular politics don't deny that certain groups are hurt disproportionately more than other groups, nor does it deny that particular groups have unique knowledge about their own oppression. But in the end, the job of radical politics is not to fight for the particular. Instead, look to the truth of the particularity. Why are some people declared symptoms and others not? Why are some people declared invisible? Why does this group lead a shorter life than that group? The answer should lead us to the universal. How does this particular exclusion implicate all of us? What does the trans experience illuminate about the way gender works for everyone? How does systemic racism work to turn groups away from systemic change? And I'm not saying this because I want to share a cool new strategy to convince cis people to care about trans people or to convince white people to care about racism. I'm saying this because it's fucking true. Systemic oppression reveals systemic problems, and we're all living in it. Systemic change requires us to understand that we're all living in it. Number 3, our fundamental antagonism. Hamilton structures itself around a fundamental antagonism, the relationship between Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
It is the most important relationship in the show.
The narrator of the show is Aaron Burr. In the musical, he was Hamilton's first friend and soon became a rival. Like Hamilton, Burr was an orphan who showed promise at a young age. But as Hamilton rose to greater heights due to his unrelenting drive, ambition, and willingness to take risks, Burr trailed behind him, unable to attain the same level of success and influence.
If there's a reason, is there a reason why we're born where we are or grow up where we are? If there is a reason, Burr says, I'm going to wait for what that reason is to present itself. And Hamilton says, nothing's promised. I'm going to grab everything I can while I can.
Burr and Hamilton represent two fundamental forces. On Burr's side, careful, waiting, utilitarian calculation.
And if there's a reason I'm still alive, when everyone who loves me has died, I'm willing to wait for it.
And on Hamilton's side, risk, drive, movement.
I will lay down my life if it sets us free. Eventually, you'll see my ascendancy, and I am not throwing away my shot.
After years of disagreements and political battles, Burr challenges Hamilton to a duel and kills him.
This was going to happen. They're fundamentally different men.
Individually, these drives are destructive on their own. Burr's obsession with political success at the expense of his own beliefs ultimately leads him to losing all the political ambitions that he cared about.
If you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for?
Hamilton's unrelenting drive leads him to great heights, but he also follows his drive off a cliff towards political suicide as he chases after his legacy at the expense of his own family.
When your words obsessed with your legacy.
So you'd think that the lesson might be, hey, these guys should work together. They're the yin and yang, two fundamental approaches to politics, life, mortality, and we need them both to survive. Every political movement needs those who act and those who calculate. Every artist knows when to chase the incessant spark within them and when to step away.
Are you Burr or are you Hamilton?
I'm both. We're all both. That's the whole thing.
But wait, didn't these guys try to kill each other? They never worked together. Their differences ran too deep. Perhaps the lesson isn't that these forces need to work together per se, but that these forces will always be in struggle against each other. We need not reconcile them. It's futile. Instead, allow the dialectical struggle to continue and develop into something different. Learn from that struggle.
Constitution's a mess.
So it needs amendments.
It's full of contradictions.
So is independence.
The musical shows us that the debates of the past are the debates that continue until today. The fundamental conflicts in American society, that of radical change versus careful conservatism, whether power should lie federally or locally, these conflicts are eternal. They do not exist to be solved. They are America at its purest essence. They are society.
We wrote these ideals into the Constitution, and we've always fallen short, and we're always trying to get closer.
Today's progressive has the correct instinct in understanding that violence is inherent to social structure, daily life, and politics. That's an integral component of leftist critique, right? We want to know, how is it racist? How is it sexist?
Racist, sexist, homophobic.
How is it ideological? Those are the million-dollar questions. Or maybe you paid $50,000 to ask them in a master's program. They're good and necessary questions. They allow us to understand and attack today's injustices. This line of inquiry potentially leads us to believe that if we critique and disavow enough, that a harmonious and perfect society waits for us on the other side. But we have to understand that society does not exist. No society, no system exists without antagonism, struggle, and conflict. There will always be a variety of different communities with different ways of understanding and organizing their reality. A good political system, or at least instinct, needs to account for this. And let's be fair, democracy is one of the few political systems that accounts for antagonism, that thrives on antagonism. What passes for politics online today is almost comedic. And it's worse because it's not technically wrong, it's just not politics. Like, oh, if you buy from this store, you're ontologically evil. You follow this account, you're evil. You listen to this artist, you can't call yourself a leftist. Here's why everything you ever loved is problematic and why everything is wrong and why you specifically are a horrible person. And it's hard because, yes, if you shop at a fast fashion place, you're giving money to an exploitative industry. And yes, if you buy a Kanye West album, you're giving money to a shitty person. None of this is wrong to point out. These are net negative actions we need to avoid. But centering the endless cycle of critique isn't radical leftist politics. These critiques usually aren't followed by effective tips for how to organize systematic targeted boycotts or how to organize direct action against racial injustice. Because online leftism is liberalism par excellence. It is the commodification of social movements. It's about tailoring your consumption to fit a market niche, about telling individuals, hey, if you want to be identified with the good team, don't do this, instead of promoting the material good that groups of people could do. There is no perfectly uncancelable person. There is no one without blood on their hands. There is no system without a history of struggle. There is no route to a harmonious and orderly society. And the attempt to establish one often leads us to fascism. Liberalism wants us to believe that it's possible for a capitalist system to exist without violence or domination in some form. Our task in response is not to make every individual feel shitty and powerless by pointing out every unethical thing they're implicated in. Our task is to understand that violence is inherent to the state, to liberal capitalism, and to create a popular movement that can effectively counter this violence. And you know what's not effective? Making people feel shitty and powerless. That's not to say that you shouldn't feel bad about doing bad things. It's to say that bad things are a part of constituting a society with a bunch of different groups of people in it. As individuals, we bear responsibility for our part in that. But politics is not about individuals, it's about the people. So when confronted with a violent system, what can the people, not a person, but what can the people do in response? A new popular movement doesn't have to be the movement to end all of capitalism. That would be nice, and that's certainly the final battle we have to face, but that doesn't mean that every other popular movement is just as good as doing nothing. There are material issues that affect your community directly that move us closer to effective politics. Unionize your workplace. Find out how at iww.org. Write for a leftist publication. Find a mutual aid group at foodnotbombs.net or mutualaidhub.org. Go to dsausa.org and join a local chapter. I don't care if you have squabbles with every single leftist organization on the planet. Just find one, make friends, and change it from within. It's a tale as old as time, leftist infighting. When the movement doesn't feel perfect enough, we decide to stand still. Here's Angela Davis regretfully recounting leftist movement's inability to come together.
At a time when there was not a great deal of unity, embracing people from various racial and ethnic backgrounds, embracing, workers and students. There tended to be, unfortunately, a kind of competition among those of us who considered ourselves as the oppressed. One group would argue that they were more oppressed. The other group would say, no, women are more oppressed than black people. Even though there may be differences separating various groups of people in our society, there are also things that we have in common. And if we are in some way the target of an oppressive socioeconomic system, we should be able to figure out how to stand together.
Resist the liberal temptation to parade your social movement like a commodity with lesser or greater value than another one. I don't care if you think it is objectively more valuable. If you don't want your movement to die, build bridges, connect, fight together, do something, literally just do something. Throw tomato soup at the Mona Lisa. Stop complaining about Taylor Swift's jet consumption and do something. Oh, and for some reason, online leftists don't like hearing this, but please, for the love of God, vote in your local and federal elections. And yes, they do make a fucking difference. It's the difference between someone like me getting healthcare or not. It's the difference between a federal judge striking down racial justice protections or LGBTQ plus protections or keeping them on the books. Half of the people on Twitter telling you not to vote are probably unironically Russian bots. If you're not registered, go to vote.org right now and do it. Do it. Do it! And once you do that, know that the fight isn't over. Keep organizing, keep voting, keep doing something. Log off right now and do something. Go! Justice is not impossible. We can redistribute wealth, we can build strong communities, and we should. Just understand that we will never do away with antagonism. Your pet ideology will never overcome it. The struggle for meaning, the fight over unfixed signifiers, antagonism is the constituting element of any social field. This is our job now. Number 1, return to a politics of and by the people. Unite, find commonalities. If you're American, find a through line in America's radical legacy. If you hate America, find a through line in the history of your community. There have always been radical movements and events. Learn history and embody history. Become the next chapter in a common story. Number 2, identify with the symptom. Who are the left behind? Who are the uncategorizable? Make those particularities visible and translate their struggle into a universal struggle. All of our struggles are connected. All pain is pain. All suffering is suffering. Find a common will and drive towards something together. Form a chain of equivalence. Number 3, never wait for the perfect moment or movement or person. Don't let your movement become a commodity. Don't let your cause become a sliver of the market. Just make the intervention you wish to see. Find common ground with others on the basis of the intervention and this intervention alone. Your collaborators will never be perfect people, but you can build a good future together if you remain faithful to the outcome, the event, and to history. It's okay if we don't know the answer. No social movement, no revolution, no political project in history has ever perfectly planned out everything to come. Do you think capitalism was laid out perfectly when it was developing in the 17th century? Do you think the founding fathers knew how America was going to work when they wrote the Declaration of Independence?
Yeah, the founding fathers were, to some degree, flying by the seats of their pants.
Absolutely.
And making it up as they went along.
Yeah. Oh, we've always been making it up as we go along.
Don't let that stop you. Don't let people tell you that your ideas work in theory but not in practice. Just do something. Do something. If you want to continue to see work like this for free, please consider supporting my Patreon to get access to exclusive videos, a podcast where I talk to other video essayists, and behind-the-scenes adventures. Head to patreon.com/aretheygay to check it out. A big thank you goes out to my current patrons: Vince, Blossom Puppy, Closeted History, Bernoan, Violet Chavez Gilbride, Alex Fainstock, Robot Spock, Logan Lind, Griff Q, Ash Flynn, Gwen Kavinska, Bert Spiel-Penning, Antonio Sarcevic, William Thomas, Cartographic, Cliff, Jay McKenzie, Jeff Sheehy, Sarah S. Max, Doug Pug 43, Phantom Flavor, Domia, Mars Rover, Sinister, Henry, Kaylin S., Breens, Gray Rainier, Gabriela Surita, Amaranta, Malpertuis, Eric Genome, Purple Giraffe, Aubrey Schumann, May Purse, Z, Abby the Fox, Eliza, Shane Anderson, Lev, Kilmani, Paul D. Hunt, Hogg, Annalisa Koenig, Yona, Diana Etoile, Hope Jazen Tuliana, Joy Palmer, Faye Kingett, Kay Mathieson, Megan, Bertalos Flute, Momo Mateo, Rich, Red, Patrick Luce, Spooky Doo, Kiera Williams, Gibran Essa, Rue, Daniel McDonald, Luce, Phil E., Josie McGaughy, Eva Laney, Trill Seeker, Ipsy, Meek, Barbecutie, Fa, SG, Alnara, Christopher Delano, Jenny Tang, Sarah McDonnell, Vivid Discipline, Guilherme Tamaki, Jocelyn Esther 4, Laura Bauma, Chloe, Maz Swift, Beula, Arapaima Slim, Omar Apollo Strongest Soldier, Ellie J. Vela, Them, C. Schaefer, Birick, Jess Fisher, Trixie, Tony Gallagher, Raunchy Beeves, Jack Bennett, Luca, Aiden Kedzierski, Kara Goolsby, Mike Kent, Frey, Nick H., Muhammad Amory, Ermine, Declan Wall, Tinny Zeta, Arrogant Trucks, Gian Belong, Flora Feldner, Sea Legs, The Illustrious Squeer Dynasty, Megan Lowndes, D. Hirsch, Joshua Clark, Lauren Walsh, Nawurg, Daniela De Leon, Eyes of a Tragedy, Mahala Byrne, Cheese Boy, Sidekick, Matthew Mercer, Fickle Harpy, Tony Whitson, Ataplease, Kenzie Woodbridge, E.O., Eric J. Moffitt, Six Slugs, Lynn Shee, Eris Arlecchino, Dan, Michael Gallisby, Fizzy Milk 22, Jacob Palmer, Will Titmus, Jess, Easy, Tanner Clark, Aiden Lisandro, Jiminy's Journal, Dropout Ninja, Diane, Don Hopkins, Jade Persuades, Georgie Dan, Barbie V, Marshall Mazingale, SH, Anna Midkiff, Drainix, Paul, Avery, RSS, Mel, Emma Anastasi, Solberg Birgis Dotier, Chester Snap, Megan, Elena Amesqua, Mary, Levi Margolis, Penguin with a Tie, Heather Frasechild, Colin Coltrera, Charlie Rose, Amanda S., Irritated Nick, Manway, Florencia Rumpel Rodriguez, Dane Much, Paige, Danny Chalice, Hannah O., Aaron Seiler, Esper Lady, Brad the Great, Charles Hero, Justin Chapman, Oyster Philosophy, Liz Hirschman, Meggie, Moye, Ari Chivukula, Sam Gersel, Elizabeth Morgan, Gabriella Day, Megalomaniac 64, Kyle Norris, Ryvier, AJ, Keaton Galaxy, Bobby Jane Disforges, Jinkies, Lillian, L. Nolan, Tash, Valued Customer, Ellie Noor, Jackson S. Costello, Guardito, Julie Werner, Beatrice Dahl, Hida, Cobalt Pink, All Pizzas Are Personal, Timo, Brandon Uzumaki, Fat Kirk, Wainoa, Rosamori of the Sea, Nye Fan, Catboy Girl, Ian T. Gray, Richard Knight, Sarah Parker Shemilt, Taylor White, Nicholas Bloom, Colin Unger Leader, Tanya P., Jack, Umayma Beige, Janin,